A game against Gligoric.
Well, this is different. We'll see, because my opponent was a legendary grandmaster from Yugoslavia. Gligoric was one of the, big names in international chess in that period. Many times candidate for the world championship and so on. And he put a very strong resistance in our game. Therefore, the game will be different, because we have two very strong grandmasters playing, for this decisive advantage. In what happens in our game would be small. Later on, it'll be smaller, and you have to realize a small advantage in a very complicated game.
To become a big advantage.
Yeah, therefore the game will be very interesting. So we have a normal position from Taras from now on. Knight c6, g3, knight f6, bishop g2, bishop e7, castle, castle. Okay, now the first interesting moment, white took in c5. The alternative also well known and played many times in World Championship and so on. Karpov, Kasparov, many others, bishop g5. This is the main alternative, bishop g5. But this is also very interesting. White has almost the same idea to control the square d4 with a piece, to put a piece later on in d4. Now the bishop has to go back, of course, no? And now after bishop e3, you are threatening knight c5, bishop d4, rook c1, knight d4. And advantage for white. White is better in any case. So knight d4, rook c1, and rook e8, knight d4. And now Gligoric decided to wait and hope to get such a position where he has some initiative at the first sight. Actually, white is better in any case, even here, immediately after the opening. But maybe the advantage would be too small to try to win the game. We'll see. Well, so after bishop d7, knight c3 is the best move. Again, control of the central squares all the time, So now he has to decide what to do. He took in d4, I took in d4. Now he plays bishop c6 and tries to demonstrate that the advantage for white is too small to try to win. I mean, even in such a, complicated game, it's clear that white is better, but he has control of the central squares, and you attack later on the weak pawn from d5, Isolani, like in Taras.
Isolani.
All the time it happens like this. You play against the Isolani. Well, okay, now he seeks some initiative on the other side by playing a5.
So this is why it's not a good idea to take this knight from here?
If he takes in c3, if white takes in
yes.
No. It's bad because he doesn't have Isolani anymore.
Yes.
Yeah, so
no more Isolani.
So bishop b4. Okay, so e3. You invite him to continue. I mean, what to do? I mean, if he takes twice in c3, it's clear that white has a bigger advantage because the diagonal will be opened. If he takes with the knight in c3 and with the bishop, you trade two pieces, the knight and the bishop from d4, but later on the pawn from d5 will be attacked 3 times. And it's clear in white's favor, So, of course, now he has to try to resist. I mean, he gives the bishop. Now white has pair of bishops, but maybe it's not enough because you can't attack immediately 3 times the pawn from d5. The pawn from d5, he's weak, of course. The pawn is weak. But how can you attack many times the pawn? You have to demonstrate that you have enough here, Yeah. You have to move around like this, with white. You have the advantage, but it's small enough, you see. You have to, again, to play very precisely, step by step, all the time. Black defends himself. Not more, but you have to try to win a better position. Okay, white is clearly better. Okay, queen e2, queen g5. He's moving here and there, waiting, you see. Queen f3, queen g6, h4. I told you, step by step, move by move. h4, knight d6. He's trying to come with the knight in c4 or in b5, later on. Has to move something. This is the problem. So now queen f4, and h6, bishop f3. That prepares queen g4. After queen g4, he's forced to trade queens. And we play quietly an endgame. Much better endgame for white, with no counterplay at all for black. Black has only to wait here. And white can play quietly, preparing a better endgame always, a little bit better, and so on. But you have to have patience, you can't win immediately in 2-3 moves. You have to play a long game. So now queen g4. All right. So he took in d4, in g4 I took, knight d6. Now we have the endgame. We're trying to have a better endgame, to win somehow the pawn from d5, if possible. And he has to defend very, precisely with black. It's most unpleasant anyway for black here. So bishop c5. He doesn't give you the possibility to take the knight in d6, because afterwards everything is very clear. If you have white bishop against white bishop, you can attack 3 times the pawn from d5, you see. And that is probably winning already for white. So knight c4, bishop d4, knight d6. Of course, he's,
looking for a draw.
He was looking for a draw, yes. So now it's rook c2, knight b5, and bishop c5. Okay, now, first of all, you won a tempo. Now it's not possible to come back to d6, first of all.
But why you didn't let the bishop on d4?
Because you have to move something with white. You try to weaken a little bit more the position from black, here. You don't have such an advantage already, which is decisive. You are better, but not decisive, not yet. No? So bishop c5. Rook e4, bishop e2, okay, rook e8. No, now bishop d3, I told you, move by move, So rook e5, and now f3, also very important decision, because you want to come with the king and you control all the center squares, you see. You put the king in f2, you have the 2 bishops, you have control on d file, on c file, and the pawn from d5 is still weak. But the only possibility to try to win is to give later on the bishop from d3. You take the knight from b5 and you win the pawn from d5, but maybe it's enough or it's not enough, we'll see. You see? If the advantage is enough to try to win, it's okay. You have a very good chance to win. But it's still very complicated, a long way to go. And he puts a very, very good defense, from here. A very good resistance. So now rook e8. Okay, now you took the pawn. He takes, rook takes d5. Okay, the first part of the game is all right. For white, won a pawn, has a good game, has a good chance to try to win, but it's still very complicated. You have to find a good plan. You control again the position and you try to move the pawns now. You come...
The majority,
you put the bishop in d4, you have the open line. White was threatening already rook c5, So rook a5, therefore, and now, exactly here, we play e4. Okay, we have time to play e4.
But why not putting now the rook on c5 instead of e4? Why not directly?
If he wants to trade some pieces, if he has time to trade many pieces, it's almost draw,
Even so, you have a pawn.
For instance, the end game only with bishops is almost draw. If you trade the 2 rooks, you have to be very careful,
Yeah.
White bishop against the black bishop somehow is very difficult to win, maybe impossible, even with pawn up,
Okay.
So, okay, you have to keep as many pieces on board as possible, So e4, f5, okay. E5 is the only chance to try to win. If you took in f5, again, was very weak, because after rook takes f5, you are almost forced to move f4. If you move f4, it's also, almost impossible to win afterwards, because the black bishop becomes very strong afterwards, controls the central squares.
Everything
so
here.
e5, okay. After e5, we have another game here. Okay. Rook c4, okay. He's waiting, of course, now. rook c2. Now the idea is clear. We want to come quickly to c7 if he moves the bishop. If he doesn't move the bishop, later on we try to sacrifice the rook, the exchange in c6, getting an endgame with 2 pawns against the exchange, with very good chances to win, but also very complicated. It's not move by move in every position, you know. So okay, he waits again. We are preparing rook c2, rook d5. Of course, he has to wait. a3, everything on black. You see, every pawn is now on black, and now we want to sacrifice c6 later on. So he waits, of course. Now we give the exchange. He has to wait. I mean, he has to take. And now rook c4, also very strong move. Rook c4. Now both pawns are attacked. If he doesn't do anything, we have time to take immediately on a4. It's okay. It's very good for white.
But now, here it wasn't possible for him to...
If he takes there, then you have the control on c7. You give check in c7. He has to trade one rook. Yes. And it's enough. The endgame is completely winning for white, because he's pawn up, only rook endgame, and it's completely winning because it has too many weaknesses. Pawn down and too many weaknesses. He loses. You take in d7, he takes, and rook d4, and rook c4, and it's completely winning. Yeah, he has to play there, and now not maybe even better rook c5 or rook c6. Rook c5 first now. He has to come there, and now king f4, and this is reasonable for black. Yeah. Because you want to take another pawn, and you have also check in c6, and it's completely winning. The e pawn wins in any kind of position. That was very easy. But, of course, it makes the position very complicated. It's not so easy. You takes, and now rook c4. Now we start another game, practically. Now you have to win a winning position. But we have to demonstrate how you can win. You need a very, very good technique here, you see. Until the end. Now c5, okay. All right, so bishop back is the best, because now you defend the pawn from b2. If he gives check in d3, you have king f4, very active, and he loses the pawn in a4 on c5. Now he doesn't want to give the pawn from a4 because that stops a little bit the white pawns from the other side, you know. Yeah. So he gives the pawn from c5. It seems that black is lost completely, but it's not so easy, you'll see. If he defends very well. King f4, king g6, rook c8, okay. So he's waiting. Now, in some kind of positions, you want to come immediately with the pawn in e6, and you have winning endgame with the idea e7 immediately, or rook g8. 2 threats, you know, in g7 and e8. Yeah. So, okay, he controls the square e6, important. Okay. So now we won the tempo. He wants to have an endgame, but it's not so easy. If you take in e6, probably not enough to win. Because if the black comes later on to e6 and the rook is active, is enough to get a draw probably with black. If you have such a position, for the moment you don't agree to trade rooks, you know. Rook d7, all right. Rook c6. You come back with the king, coming, if possible, to d5.
To b5?
King d5, yeah.
d5?
King d4, king d5.
Here.
And later
so
on,
what's the plan of white here? What he's trying to do now?
He has to wait all the time. White yes. Wants to have an end game, completely winning end game, if we can push the pawn, yes, no? Or if we have time to play in some kind of position, rook d6 with the king in d5. That gives a very good chance to try to win.
So to push also the pawn
this way. That gives a very good chance. You know. Usually, in any kind of position, the pawns e5, e and d are almost winning in any kind of position. You know.
If they are free pawns.
The central pawns.
Yes.
Therefore, I told you it's very complicated, still very complicated. So king d5, okay. King g8. Here, I was almost... sure that white is completely winning in this kind of position.
Yes.
I was surprised that he could find all the time, something, and the position still is very complicated, So rook e8, he has to wait all the time, So, all right. And now, finally, we have time to push.
Yeah.
So what to do now with black? He has to move like this. Now, of course, if you try to take immediately in d8, he has time to come very quickly with the rook in d3, hoping to get some kind of endgame where he can escape,
If you take here?
If you take in d8,
yes,
and you go with the king in c6, after rook d3 is not clear.
Okay.
Yeah.
You can pick up this.
Yeah, it's not clear, because if you play e7, it's even better for black, because he has time to come with the king in f7 and you don't win anymore.
And stops everything.
Yeah, stops everything. So you have to be careful also with white, Rook d7. Now the difference is clear. Now if you take in d7, you are lost with black, Because now if you take in d7, you takes, and king f7, you have time to put the king in d6, and that gives a tempo and that wins. You have control with the king. He can't move the king to e7 because you control the diagonal, That's the difference.
Yes.
So black has to wait again. King h7. But now the king is far away, in h7. Again, it seems that white is completely winning here, But it's not clear. He gives the pawn in g7. But you can't take immediately because you lose a piece. If you take with the bishop, maybe he can take immediately there, and it's probably winning for black already, because he has rook up. Now what to do? Bishop, king e6, the only move. No, king d6 is losing for white. King e6.
King e6.
King e6. Maybe that gives a chance, but it's not clear. Even here, king f8, and black holds the position. You can't win. If you take in f5, is winning for black after king e7. Yeah, it's unbelievable, because he has a rook. Yeah, the rook is strong enough to try to win with black. So you have to be also very careful with white. Well, he was a very strong grandmaster, Gligoric. Therefore, I told you it's completely different the game. So
put a lot of fight.
Yeah, put a lot of fight. Even if the position is winning, but you have to show how you can win. To demonstrate a very good technique.
You decided to take, but now the king is.
No, but now it's different because you have the tempo with white. Now, if he takes in d7, you take with the pawn, and after king takes, you have time to go to e7, and that wins.
Yes.
Yeah. You have completely winning endgame. But now the big surprise, after rook e8, finally you lose the pawn from e6. And if you lose the pawns from e6, you have to move again to try to get another winning position. This is unbelievable.
Yes.
You could have the strong pawn in e6, and now you lose the pawn. You have to find another possibility to try to win. Move by move. Forced.
Yes.
So, okay, now we have this endgame. Now, how can we try to win? We attack the pawn. He has to move the rook in a6. Now again, we try to get some kind of Zugzwang here, because now our king in f4 is very strong. See? So if we get an endgame with a tempo more for white, maybe it's enough to try to win. So, okay, very important check. Now he goes to h6. Now we attack the other pawn. No? He has to play like this, because if he loses the pawn from f5, it's decisive. Afterwards, we have time to give a check mate in d2 or play even g4, and 2 pawns, rook and bishop, wins in any position. So this is winning for white. Now we agree to trade rooks because we have 2 passed pawns on the other side, A and B. In any kind of position, if you play precisely, you win. But until the end, it's move by move, until then. So A4, we start. Okay, to push the pawns. b3. So again, he has to wait. Bishop b6. That prepares the move a5, b4. You know?
Yeah.
No, past pawns. King e5. Central pawns. We centralize the king. So, rook c3, no? The only move. Now we give the pawn from f3, but we have the two passed pawns. The two passed pawns must win in any position. You know?
But what is the idea with the centralized king? To move quick
You
on...
control the other king. I mean, you don't allow the king to come, you know, to f6, e6.
Yes,
to come
yes.
very quickly, you know.
Yeah.
So now the king is a little bit far away, and we have time to push the pawns, a5. He doesn't have time to take the second pawn in g3 because the pawns are too quick on the other side, you know.
Yeah.
If we can play a6, he's winning anyway, you know, immediately. So here will be Zugzwang. In any position, it's Zugzwang. Bishop c5, we give the move. King f7 had to move something, but where? If he moves the rook down,
Yes.
then we have time to go with the king and then b5, a6. Enough. If he plays like this, he gives the pawn from f5. Again, winning endgame. So we take the pawn. Now the position is finally winning clearly with white, you know. g4. The simple move, g4, and now we have too many pawns, you see. So h6, and in this position he resigned because now it was a tempo, decisive tempo. Now he has to take in a6, no? The only move.
He resigned.
And h7, rook a8, bishop d4. And we have still the bishop. Bishop and pawn is completely winning. Bishop d4. We win the rook, now. King d5, for instance, the only move, no? Now queen, he has to take. We take.
Yes.
And after king c4, we play bishop c3 and is winning, yeah? Because now the pawns win. But very complicated, I told you, until the end, you know. He put a fantastic resistance with black, you know, well, very strong grandmaster, you know, legendary grandmaster, Gligoric. One of the most interesting endgames that I had in my whole career against a very, very strong opponent, you know. And very beautiful and very instructive also, you know.
Correct.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Gheorghiu.
You're welcome. But I told you, completely different game from the others, you know. You could see.
Took a little bit longer.
Well, and very unclear. Maybe it was not enough to win. Maybe it was enough, you know. In any kind of position was like this, you know.
Yeah.
Move by move, you know.
Correct.
Yeah.